I'm excited for my raise, I said, trying not to grin too wide. I'd stayed late every night for 6 months, cleaned up the back-end systems, trained 2 interns, fixed the quarterly disaster Mark caused. It was my moment, or so I thought. My boss, Greg, didn't even look up from his coffee. He chuckled. "What raise?" he said flatly. "We gave it to Mark." I blinked. "What?" He turned to HR. They nodded and slid a packet across the glass table. The header read, "Salary increase approval, Mark Evans." I felt the blood drain from my face. HR cleared her throat. "You were never on the list." Mark leaned back in his chair with that smug, bro-club smirk. "Oops," he said, pretending to wince. "I meant to tell you." The room fell into a weird silence. Not guilty, just awkward. The kind of silence that happens when people don't see you bleed, just glitch. I stood up. "I see," I said. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I walked back to my desk, grabbed my mug, my USB, and the little plant I'd nurtured through every late-night deadline. No one followed. No one stopped me. I was just gone. But here's what they didn't know. I had been keeping receipts. Every stolen credit. Every overlooked report. Screenshots. Emails. A backup of the codebase Mark claimed he built, but didn't. And I wasn't walking out defeated. I was walking out armed. My name is Jenna Lee. And from wherever you're watching this, stay with me. Because you've never seen revenge served like what I had planned next. 2 weeks passed. No calls. No emails. Not even a "sorry, it didn't work out." I guess they assumed I'd just vanish quietly, like every other woman they undervalued and pushed out. But I didn't vanish. I went building. See, while Mark was posting celebratory selfies and Greg was patting himself on the back for promoting leadership loyalty, I was turning my apartment into a war room. I had backups of every code sprint I authored, of voice memos of strategy meetings Mark slept through, screenshots of Slack convos where he literally asked me to reword this so I sound smarter. I also had one more thing, an NDA I never signed. They didn't even think I was important enough for one. That was their first mistake. The second? Underestimating my memory. I started drafting a Medium post. Title: How I Built a $1 million Platform While a Mediocre Man Took My Credit and My Raise. But I didn't publish it yet. Not until I gave one final warning. I sent an email directly to Greg. Subject: Attribution request. Final chance to make this right. It was short, professional, and terrifying if you knew what I had. Greg replied 3 hours later.
His tone was different now.
"Let's hop on a call." I declined. No more talks. Just action. The next morning, Mark emailed me directly. "Speech balloon, hey Jenna. Just wanted to say sorry again. It was never personal. You're great at what you do." I didn't reply. I just attached a zip file of the code base he claimed as his own. Then BCC'd the CTO of the company that had just acquired our startup in a $12 million deal. That's when the panic began. I saw it unfold on LinkedIn in real time. Mark's promotion post disappeared. Greg's brag about nurturing internal talent was quietly deleted. Then came the whispers. Then came the audit. And I hadn't even dropped the real bomb yet. It was a Tuesday when the ripple turned into a wave. I wasn't even watching when it happened. Someone sent me the screenshot. Subject line leaked. Urgent. Internal IP review. Attribution discrepancy. Evans. Evans. Mark. By Wednesday, he was off the company Slack. By Friday, his LinkedIn headline quietly changed to "Open to work, former product lead." Except he was never a lead. He was a thief. And now the industry knew. I didn't have to say a word. The CTO's team did the digging. The code review exposed Mark's complete lack of technical authorship. They cross-referenced logs, found my commits, found his edits. Turns out, oops, I forgot to tell you, doesn't cover intellectual theft, especially not during an acquisition. Meanwhile, Greg tried to save face. He sent me an email. "Speech balloon, we'd love to bring you in for a consulting role, just short-term, of course. Happy to discuss compensation." I laughed out loud. He wanted the fire after trying to snuff it out. So I replied, "Speech balloon, Greg. I wouldn't return to that building if it were on fire and you asked me to blow on the flames." Then I hit publish. My Medium post dropped at 10:17 a.m. It took 7 minutes to go viral. By noon, it was trending on Twitter. Headlines started to appear. She did the work. He got the raise. She got the last word. Startup queen quietly topples tech bro empire. I got interview requests from TechCrunch, Fast Company, The Verge. People shared their stories in the comments. Women, non-binary devs, interns who'd been erased by louder voices. I wasn't just a name anymore. I was a symbol. And Mark? He was a case study in what happens when you mistake silence for weakness. Greg tried to spin it, said it was a miscommunication, a learning opportunity, but no one bought it. Because I didn't just pack my desk that day. I took their house of cards with me. 2 weeks after the post blew up, I got the message. From Alana Ruiz, CTO at Halcyon Tech, a major player.
Subject:
Let's talk. I read your story. I've got a proposal. We met at a quiet cafe in Midtown. She didn't bring a PR person. No legal shield. Just her and a notebook. Respect shows in how people arrive. She slid a folder across the table. Inside, a 6-month build contract. Full technical lead authority. A blank check for salary. Equity on top. "I don't want you to come back to tech," she said. "I want you to lead where tech's going next." I smiled. "Why me?" She leaned in. "Because you don't just build systems. You expose the ones that are broken." I signed that night. No hesitation. No second thoughts. I was no longer walking into rooms hoping for space. Now I was designing the floor plan. Meanwhile, Mark ghosted the internet. No tweets. No posts. Just occasional rumors. He tried freelancing, but every client pulled out once they Googled his name. Greg? Still holding onto his VP title, like a life raft in a tsunami. But no one in tech takes his calls without smirking. He became a cautionary tale in HR seminars. And me? I hired a team. Half of them were women who DM'd me after my article. People with fire, not fame. We launched our first beta within 8 weeks. Secured funding before we even finished our pitch deck. We didn't just build a product. We built culture. No stolen credit. No whisper campaigns. No invisible labor. And on launch day, someone from my old company tried to tag me in a congratulatory LinkedIn post. You know the kind, fake support for traction. I replied publicly. Speech balloon, don't get to celebrate what you tried to silence. It got 14,000 likes in under 2 hours. I wasn't just the girl who left a job. I became the woman who rewrote the whole damn playbook.
And they?
They got left behind, exactly where they'd tried to leave me. Her name was Michelle, head of HR from the company I left. The same woman who slid the folder across the table and told me, "You were never on the list." She called me from a blocked number, left a voicemail. "Hi, Jenna. I know things didn't end smoothly, but we'd like to talk. There's been a shift in leadership. Maybe there's a way to rebuild." Rebuild. As if I was the one who knocked it down. I didn't call back, but I did screenshot it. Saved it in a folder labeled, "They Remember." Later that week, I got invited to speak at a Women in Tech conference.
Keynote.
Main stage. 5,000 seats. The intro read, Jenna Lee, founder, engineer, systems breaker, and blueprint creator. I stood under stage lights, heart thudding, and looked out over a sea of women. Some fresh grads, some battle-worn vets. And I told them everything. Not just about Mark, but about how it feels to watch your work wear someone else's name. To hear a laugh after you ask for a raise you earned. To be forgotten in meetings, then expected to applaud someone else's win. The room didn't clap right away. They just sat with it. Then came the thunder. A standing ovation that didn't feel like praise. It felt like release. Afterward, a girl no older than 20 approached me. Tears in her eyes. Fists clenched. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was alone. I shook her hand. You're not. You never were. You were just quiet. And they built their thrones on that silence. That night, I received another email. This time from Greg. A different tone.
Desperate.
Speech balloon, things have changed. We were wrong. I was wrong.
Can we talk?
I didn't respond. But I did post a quote the next morning. When the system breaks you, rebuild outside of it. When they erase you, print your own pages. And when they finally remember your name, make sure it's on the door, not just the invite. It was shared over 30,000 times. I never looked back, because I wasn't on their list. I was writing a new one. They started sending care packages, branded mugs, "We miss you" cards, even a handwritten note from their new CEO, who, by the way, was brought in after I exposed Greg's incompetence.
Cute.
But I wasn't interested in nostalgia, with a bow on top. I wasn't the woman who left that building quietly. I was the one who made silence expensive. Then came the kicker. A mutual connection forwarded me a job listing. Page facing up director of innovation, confidential company. $320,000 salary. Stock options. Remote optional. It was my old role. The one they'd mocked me out of. But now it had my fingerprints all over it, the responsibilities, the strategy, the language I once pitched in that same boardroom. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I scheduled a post. It dropped Monday at 9:01 a.m. It's wild to see companies hire for roles they once told you didn't exist. I guess building something valuable always looks obvious in hindsight. Signed, the woman who walked out and built the exit into an empire. No hashtags. No tagging. Just truth.
Raw. Clean.
Ruthless. And again it exploded. Comment after comment.
This.
You built what they feared. Every burned bridge lit your way forward. By noon, Michelle from HR sent one more email. Speech balloon, Jenna, we understand this door may be closed. But if you're ever open to conversation, I replied with one sentence. Speech balloon, I don't revisit places that required my silence to stay comfortable.
Blocked.
Deleted. That was the last I ever heard from them. Because I didn't just walk away from the building. I condemned it. And what I built in its place. They'll never be able to replicate. Because it wasn't just a job. It was mine. I stood across the street from their new office. Shiny, sterile, rebranded. Different logo. Same rot underneath. It wasn't nostalgia. It was reconnaissance. Because while they were busy scrubbing their history, I was busy acquiring part of their future. You see, through Halcyon's funding arm, I bought a quiet majority share in one of their core vendors, the one that powers their back-end infrastructure. No one knew. Not until the contract came up for renegotiation. And I walked in. Not with a badge. With a board seat. Greg wasn't there anymore. Neither was Mark. But Michelle? She recognized me the moment I stepped through the frosted glass doors. Her eyes widened. She stood up. Jenna, we didn't realize that I owned this room now. I smiled. That makes two of us. The meeting was quick. They wanted discounted rates, preferred support, long-term security. I offered none. Just new terms. Strict. Expensive. Non-negotiable. And when Michelle hesitated, I leaned in. I suggest you sign. Before someone who remembers less than I do walks in next quarter.
She did.
Hands trembling. No eye contact. I left without shaking a single hand. Back in my car, I looked at the skyline. A city of towers built by people no one remembers. Funded by people no one respected. And run now. By me. That night, I hosted a dinner for my new dev team. We toasted with plastic cups. Laughed until our ribs hurt. No suits. No hierarchy. No stolen ideas. Just builders. Free and seen. As I cleared the table, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Speech balloon, you won, Jenna. Hope it was worth it. I didn't respond. I just whispered to myself. It wasn't about winning. It was about owning the ground they thought I should crawl on. 3 months later, I was the keynote speaker at a national tech summit. Main stage. LED walls the size of billboards. Thousands in the audience. And guess who was listed as a panelist on the second stage?
Michelle.
Her title had changed. Organizational culture consultant.
Cute pivot.
No mention of where she'd come from. Backstage, she walked past me,
Paused.
then turned. Jenna, she said like we were old friends who just lost touch. Your work, it's incredible. Really? What you've built is. I cut her off. Spell my last name. She blinked. What? My last name? Say it. Spell it. She hesitated. Lei? I shook my head. It's Leigh. You approved paperwork with it misspelled 3 times. And when I corrected it, you laughed and said, details aren't everything. Her face went pale. I smiled. They are now. I stepped onto the stage and stood under lights that didn't burn, they revealed. I opened with this. A year ago, I packed my desk thinking I lost everything. Today, I sign the checks for the company that powers the very tools I used to be denied access to. Applause. But I didn't pause for it. I'm not here because I'm lucky. I'm here because I stopped asking permission. I saw her in the crowd, head low, hands folded, and suddenly I wasn't angry anymore because the girl who once said, I'm excited for my raise, had become the woman who didn't need one. She created the table, wrote the contracts, signed her own damn checks. I ended with this. To every woman who was ever left off the list, don't just fight for your seat, own the building. And when I stepped off that stage, I didn't look for applause. I didn't need validation, because the silence that once dismissed me now followed them.
The message came in the form of a text. Thanksgiving at the house. Same time as always. Can't wait to see you. Love. Mom. There was no question mark. No. Are you coming this year? Just a blanket assumption like every year before that I'd be there, like I always was. I stared at the screen for a long moment, letting the familiar blend of irritation and resignation settle in. Then I typed back, sure, I'll be there. Not because I wanted to. I had already made my decision about this year weeks ago, but I knew it would be better to let the performance unfold uninterrupted for now. Micah would be there. Of course, front and center. Our mother would hover, cutting his meat like he was still 12. Dad would ask him about jobs he hadn't applied for, pretending to care while simultaneously making excuses for why nothing ever worked out. It had always been that way. When we were kids, Micah once broke a neighbor's window playing baseball in the street. I was grounded for not watching him better. He got ice cream and a hug. I worked 2 jobs through college, kept my head down, built a career from the ground up. Every raise I earned was greeted with, "You're so lucky, Micah." On the other hand, once got a temp gig at an auto shop and was treated like he'd invented the engine. And still, when the bills piled up, it was my phone that rang. When the roof leaked, I paid the repairman. When Micah's girlfriend dumped him again, I was the one who picked up at midnight. But this year was different. I'd had enough. So I said yes to dinner. Not out of love or nostalgia, but for clarity, for finality. I was walking into that house with a smile and a secret, and I had no intention of letting them write the ending. 3 weeks earlier, I had already begun the first page of my own. It was a Thursday afternoon when Carol from across the street flagged me down by the mailbox. "I ran into your mom at the farmer's market," she said, squinting against the sun. "She seems thrilled about Micah finally moving out." I blinked. "Moving where your place?" "Apparently." Carol laughed. She said, and I quote, "Micah will finally have a place of his own soon, Serene's house. It just makes sense with how much Serene travels." My throat dried, but I smiled politely, nodding as if I'd known all along. I thanked her, went inside, and closed the door quietly behind me. Then I stood in the middle of my living room, stunned. They hadn't asked, not even hinted, not a phone call, not a text, just a quiet, calculated assumption. My house was being treated like a family heirloom they had the right to reassign. I paced for a few minutes, heart thudding. Then I sat at my dining table and opened my laptop. I didn't even hesitate. By midnight, I had sent a message to my real estate agent, Valerie, titled, "Let's Talk Options." The next morning, Valerie called. "You serious?" she asked. "As serious as I've ever been." We walked through the steps together discreetly. I kept my curtains closed, deleted our emails after reading them. I didn't breathe a word to anyone. 2 days later, the listing was drafted. By the following week, I had accepted a private cash offer. The new owners were a retired couple from out of state, quiet, punctual, polite. In total, it took just under 10 days to sell the house. The paperwork was signed. I had already moved out of the master bedroom. A furnished rental near the coast was waiting for me temporary, just until I decided what came next. I sat in that rental one night with the sale contract in my hand, rereading every page. They would find out eventually, but not from me. They wanted to hand Micah my home like a gift. Fine. Let them try to wrap up an empty box. Thanksgiving was still 2 weeks away. I had plenty of time to smile, nod, and watch them walk straight into the silence I had left behind. And I knew exactly what I would say when they did. The driveway was already full when I pulled up. My father's truck, Micah's dented sedan, and a minivan I didn't recognize were squeezed along the curb. I parked a few houses down and walked the rest of the way, steadying my breath as I reached the porch. The door opened before I could knock. "There's my girl." Mom beamed, arms outstretched like she hadn't once accused me of being distant in front of extended family. Her hug was tight, a little too long. Her perfume had changed lighter, sweeter, but her voice was still laced with expectation. Inside, the house looked the same. Neatly set table, cranberry sauce in a glass bowl we'd had since I was 10, pumpkin pie cooling on the counter. Tradition, down to the folds in the napkins. But the mood was off. Dad barely looked up from his glass of wine. "Glad you made it," he muttered. Micah was already sitting in what used to be my chair end of the table, near the window. He didn't even try to hide his grin. "Nice of you to show," he said. "Long drive, I didn't answer." Just placed the wine I'd brought on the counter and smoothed out a wrinkle in my blouse. Mom was humming. She never hummed. She floated around the kitchen, hands too busy, smile too wide. Dad kept checking his phone like he was waiting for news. And Micah looked like he'd just closed on something he hadn't paid for. I sat down at the far end of the table, letting the tension settle around me like steam. No one said much as we served the food, though my mother did make a comment about how this could be Micah's last holiday at home. I raised an eyebrow, but stayed quiet. Micah smirked. I met his eyes briefly. He knew I knew. They were waiting. For a moment. A signal. Something rehearsed. I passed the mashed potatoes without a word, counting each breath in silence. Then my father cleared his throat and gave Micah a look. He stood, fork in hand, like he was about to offer a toast. Micah tapped his fork against his glass with mock ceremony. "I have a little announcement," he said, beaming like someone proposing a toast at his own engagement. My mother clapped her hands together softly. My father leaned back. Folding his arms, Micah turned toward me, his eyes lit with triumph. "I'm moving into Serene's house next week," he said. "Mom and Dad said it makes sense. You travel all the time, and I need a stable place." He sat back down like it had already been finalized, like I'd nod and offer him a spare key with a bow on it. Mom looked at me expectantly, the corners of her mouth trembling with forced enthusiasm. "It just makes so much sense. Honey, you're barely there. And it's such a waste to let it sit empty. This way, Micah can have a fresh start." Dad chimed in, not bothering to meet my eyes. "We talked about it. We figured you'd agree." I lifted my wine glass slowly, let the stem rest between my fingers, and took a long sip. Then I smiled gently, evenly, and set the glass down with care. "That's funny," I said, reaching into my purse, because I sold it yesterday. The silence that followed was absolute. I placed a large manila envelope on the table and slid it across to Micah. Here's the contract, closed, signed, and filed. Micah's smirk drained from his face. What, you heard me. He snatched the envelope, flipping through the pages with increasing panic. You can't do this. I was supposed to. You weren't supposed to do anything, I said. You just assumed. Mom blinked rapidly. Wait, why would you sell the house? Dad leaned forward, his voice suddenly sharp. You didn't think to tell us. I looked at each of them in turn. Not angry, not defensive, just done. It's my house. It always was. Micah slammed the envelope shut. This is insane. You're just doing this to screw me over. No, I said quietly. I'm doing this to stop being used. No one reached for their forks. The food sat cooling, untouched. My mother's lips parted, but she said nothing. I pushed my chair back and stood. I hope you all enjoy dinner, I said, reaching for my coat. And then I walked out the front door like I should have done years ago. Are you serious right now? Micah's voice cracked with disbelief as he shoved the envelope across the table. You really sold it, my mother gasped, hand pressed to her chest like I'd just confessed to a crime. Serene, how could you? I had to find out from her, Micah snapped, pointing at me like I was a stranger. I already told my friends I was moving in. I started packing. My father leaned forward, voice cold. That was low. Even for you. I stayed seated, back straight, hands folded. You didn't ask. You just assumed. That's not how families work. He shot back. No, I said. That's not how your version of family works. Micah stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud against the floor. You're being petty, spiteful. I needed that place. I met his eyes. You needed accountability. That's not my job anymore. You think you're better than us now, he spat. No, I said, standing slowly. I think I'm finally not for sale. Mom's voice was barely a whisper. He has nowhere to go. That's not my problem, I replied. He's 34. He can figure it out. Roy's face turned red. We made sacrifices for you. I tilted my head, and I repaid everyone, plus interest. Micah slammed his fist on the table, making the dishes jump. You're unbelievable. Just buy another place and let me stay there until I raised a hand. No, you're not even using it, he barked. I'm not using you, either, I said, and that seems to be the real issue. No one spoke after that. I reached for my coat, slid one arm in, then the other. My heart wasn't racing. My hands weren't shaking. It felt like standing on dry land after swimming for too long, solid, steady. I walked to the door and paused, turning just once. I didn't ruin Thanksgiving. I just didn't volunteer to be eaten. And then I stepped outside, pulling the door closed behind me not to make a point, not for drama, but because I was ready for silence. 3 blocks away, I parked myself at a cafe still open for the holiday, ordered black coffee, and watched the sky dim. The texts started arriving before I even finished my drink. I didn't hear about it from anyone in my family. It came from Valerie, my real estate agent. Just a heads up, she said over the phone, voice tight. Your brother showed up at the house. He thought it was a mistake. Said he lived there. The Sandersons had to call the police. My stomach didn't drop. It didn't even flutter. I just exhaled. He told them you promised it to him. She added. They were shaken, but no damage done. The officer escorted him off the property. Thanks for letting me know. I said, I'll make sure he doesn't get the address to my new place. I hung up and placed my phone face down on the counter. 2 days later, the Facebook post started making rounds. It was a blurry photo of me, taken at some past family barbecue, mid-laugh, completely unaware. The caption read, Some people forget where they come from. My sister sold the family house behind our backs. Our parents are devastated. We're heartbroken. Just pray for us. Micah's name was attached. So was my mother's. who had reshared it with a broken heart emoji and a comment that simply read, "We raised her better than this." There were dozens of likes. People I hadn't seen since high school chimed in with comments like, "Disgusting," and "I hope karma finds her." One even wrote, "She probably only visits for inheritance checks." I scrolled for a while, numb. Then I closed the app and deleted it from my phone. The next day, I started getting messages from old friends, former coworkers, a few clients. "Hey, just checking in, everything okay? Saw a weird post. Wanted to hear your side. Did you really sell your parents' home out from under them?" I answered none of them. Instead, I sat down with a cup of tea and went through my inbox, gathering screenshots. Every lie, every insult, every post that painted me as a villain. They wanted to punish me for stepping out of their story, for not playing the part. But they didn't realize I had stopped asking for permission long before I ever sold the house. And if they wanted a fight, I was finally ready to name what this had always been. The next call from Valerie wasn't casual. "Did you send someone to update your forwarding address?" she asked. "No," I said immediately. "Why someone called pretending to be you, knew your full name, old address, even your birthday, said you were having phone trouble and wanted everything rerouted." I stood still, letting the silence stretch. "But they couldn't answer your security question," she continued. So I stalled and hung up. "Thank you," I said. "That wasn't me." After we hung up, I sat down and opened my laptop. The email from my bank had arrived just hours earlier. Unusual login attempt blocked. It came from a device in a city I hadn't visited in years. Micah still lived there, still used the same phone number, still thought I wouldn't fight back. I reset every password, enabled two-factor on everything. I even changed my phone number and rerouted my mail to a P.O. box. The energy wasn't anger, it was calculation, because this wasn't about the house anymore. This was identity. This was safety. It was always a game to Micah, a script he could rewrite if he shouted loud enough. In his world, boundaries didn't exist, just delays in getting what he thought he deserved. And I'd been the one holding the line for too long. Now, I was done holding it. I was reinforcing it. I backed up every message, every email, every screenshot from the last month. I made a separate folder titled Proof. I took notes on phone calls, timestamps, names, details I'd once ignored because I didn't want to make it worse. But it was already worse. It was dangerous now. I knew it was him. He didn't even bother hiding it. The messages had gone from passive-aggressive to frantic. "This isn't over. I just need to talk. You're ruining everything." And maybe I was. For him. For the first time. I started to consider what I hadn't wanted to before if this continued. I'd have no choice but to report him. The next move would be mine, and this time, it wouldn't be quiet. I unblocked my parents and dialed. My mother answered on the second ring. Seren put him on speaker. What now? There was a pause, then the muffled rustle of movement. I pictured their kitchen, the laminate countertops, the weak hum of the old refrigerator. My father stayed quiet. Then Micah's voice came through. Casual, like nothing had happened. "Oh, now you want to talk?" "No," I said. "I want you to listen. If you try to access my information again, bank, address, anything, I will press charges. Silence. I have everything backed up. I've already spoken to someone. This isn't a bluff. He's just desperate." My mother cut in. "You left him with nothing." I didn't flinch. "No, he left himself with nothing. You kept him soft and angry and dependent. That's not on me." "You're making this worse," she said, voice cracking. "You know how much we've struggled." "You've struggled," I repeated. "And every time you did, I bailed you out. Every bill, every repair, every time he ran out of options, you came to me." Micah scoffed. "You're acting like you're some kind of hero." "No," I said. "I'm acting like someone who's finally tired. I'm not your safety net. I'm not his exit plan. I'm done. We're family." My mother said quietly, "You don't get to use that word after trying to ruin mine." There was a beat of silence, and then my father finally spoke. "You've changed." I almost laughed. "I really hope so." I ended the call without saying goodbye. My hands weren't shaking when I set the phone down. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess. The heaviness I used to carry after every conversation with them was gone. That night, I turned off every notification, brewed a strong cup of coffee, and opened my laptop. I logged into my legal insurance portal and scheduled a consultation. Not because I wanted to escalate, but because I finally understood the game. They weren't going to stop, and neither was I. The weeks slipped by quietly, the way time does when no one is taking from you. My apartment was small, 2 rooms, no balcony, creaky floors, but it was mine. No one had a key but me. No one knew the address but the post office and the leasing office. The silence was strange at first, like stepping into a house where the television had always been on and realizing it never needed to be. There were no more surprise calls, no texts, no guilt trips disguised as updates, just the sound of seagulls in the morning and the low hum of the tide rolling in behind the buildings. I bought a small coffee pot and a ceramic mug with a crack along the rim. I could have replaced it, but I didn't. It reminded me that broken things can still hold warmth. I walked more, slept better, ate when I was hungry instead of when I remembered I hadn't. I started a notebook. Nothing dramatic, just phrases that came to me when the air felt still. One morning, I stood by the window as fog curled in from the water. A gull drifted past, effortless. I held my mug close and whispered, "They saw me as an asset. I became a boundary." It didn't feel like bitterness. It felt like clarity. I hadn't set out to punish anyone. I didn't need revenge. What I needed was distance, space wide enough to hold my own voice without theirs echoing over it. Micah hadn't reached out again. My parents had gone quiet. Too. Maybe they were regrouping. Maybe they were waiting for me to fold. But this time, I had nothing left to give them and nothing they could take. I sat down with my coffee and opened my laptop. A message blinked at the top of the screen, flagged from a name I hadn't seen in months. It was from Valerie. Subject line, "You'll want to see this."